Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Virtual Voyage General Aviation Roadshow. My name is Sophie O'Sullivan, and I head up the General Aviation and RPAS or Drone Unit here at the CAA. We started bringing you these roadshows back in March to coincide with coming out of lockdown from a GA perspective, and because we couldn't run any roadshows face-to-face due to the pandemic. We actually got really good feedback from these roadshows, so we ran 5 throughout March and we were able to reach 1,600 of you, and you told us that you found the sessions really useful, which is why we've put on another series this evening, and we ran 2 last week. We've created the presentations and the topics we're going to talk about tonight based on the feedback that you've given us. So we know that licensing and we know that SELMA in particular when it comes to medical are topics that you want to hear from us on. So we built the agenda around those 2 things, and we're also going to give you an update on the General Aviation Change Programme, which we introduced to you back in March. We're going to try something with a new format as well. We've got a live Q&A. I'm delighted that Pauline Vahi is here, Chair of AOPA, to help me run that panel. And Sir Stephen, the Chair of the CAA, is also going to join us. He's going to talk to us about a number of topics and then also be part of that panel. So we hope you really enjoy this evening. The topics should feel relevant. We really hope they do. And I'm going to suggest that we get cracking because there's a lot on the agenda. So we're going to go firstly to Mike Trudgill. He is our Chief Medical Officer, and he is going to talk to us about his experience as a GA pilot and about the SELMA medical system. So over to you, Mike.
Welcome to this General Aviation Virtual Voyage, where I'm going to update you on the SELMA medical IT system. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce myself and touch on the role of the medical department I lead. So I'm Dr. Mike Trudgill. I'm the Chief Medical Officer here at the CAA, but perhaps more importantly to you, I'm an aviator at heart. I've been flying for nearly 40 years now, and I've had my fair share of spills and thrills in the 50 or so types I've flown. I was military trained as a flight surgeon, occupational physician, and specialist in aviation medicine. But let me introduce my first aeroplane, a Rollison Druin Turbulent. This was real stick and rudder, no electrics, no computer, no radio, simplicity, and it was beautiful. But it makes me reflect on the medicals we did back then, stethoscope, pen, and paper. Simple, but was it beautiful? I think not. You were either fit or grounded, and that was that. I think we've come a very long way. So on to the medical department. What do? Well, we assure the human component within a flight safety system. And what do I mean by that? As you all know, every component is inspected and tested to keep you and others safe. The engine, the airframe, the controls, the avionics, and last but not least, you as the pilot. For GA, this is a medical or a pilot medical declaration, but most importantly, it's built on trust. We in the UK are a leading regulator, and I'm proud to claim that we have the most permissive standards in the world and have led the way in conditions like mental health, diabetes, and cancers. Our goal as flight physicians is to keep people flying, but we must guard our reputation. We have a duty to protect third parties, and as an industry that faces into environmental challenges and the green agenda, I don't want to attract adverse public scrutiny of our medical standards. We all have a part to play here, so please help us and please trust us. Moving on then to the medical record system. Just some background. Why did we need to change? Well, it probably doesn't surprise you that there is a legal requirement for medical record systems, and this forms the audit trail of that human component of assurance that I've talked about. The legacy system we had was over 20 years old. It was unsupported and ran on a Windows 98 architecture. Unsurprisingly, therefore, it was unreliable, and we were experiencing outages almost every other day. It was also busy. We support over 40,000 medical certifications on an annual basis. And when you couple this with the medical digital revolution that is going on at the moment, and we have to stay in step with that, data security challenges, which I think we're all aware of and are growing by the day, and the CAA drive to enhance the digital offering with an aspiration of service excellence and technological innovation, it was clear that we had to move. SELMA was selected 4 years ago now. There was extensive testing and development, and launch went ahead in March 2021. The potentials were potentially great: data security, system reliability, greater accessibility, efficiency and transparency for users, quick and easy access via a secure online CAA portal, and increasing self-service functionality that would allow pilots and air traffic controllers to view their own medical records and track progress of applications and referrals to the authority. I think we all hoped and prayed for improved functionality and better support for all users. So what happened and where are we? Well, Selma really is a system of two parts, and the first part is access to the system, which is through the customer portal. So I'm going to talk about the customer portal first. There were very, very high volume of applicants, despite our best endeavours to, shall we say, smooth the stampede. And these high volume, along with training issues, because let's face it, the system wasn't as intuitive as it should have been, resulted in a poor customer experience. The teams worked incredibly hard at tracking and resolving these issues. And I'm pleased to say that by and large, these issues are now resolved. There's good guidance and the vast majority of customers are receiving a good service. It's still not as seamless as accessing online banks, but it's really not bad. Portal reliability was another area of concern. And, I've seen and heard the complaints and comments about this, but our portal reliability during the last 3 weeks has been 99.6%. And I think you'd agree that is an incredible figure. Registration of pilots, talking of managing a large number of individuals migrating onto the system, was managed, and we've been having 1,500 coming across every month that have been prompted by our administrative staff. The situation is improving and we are coming toward the end of that workload. And in the next couple of months, we will be reducing the numbers migrating across to around about 900. Moving on then to Selma itself, the system required a hard switchover. We underestimated the training requirements and system complexity, and unfortunately there were numerous software bugs that affected the efficiency of both aeromedical examiners and the medical assessors. The faults are being fixed. The system is working, however, it's not yet as we intended and work continues. It's fair to say that cases are taking slightly longer to manage and there has been some delay in certification, but we are by and large maintaining the service that you all have grown to expect. The CAA and the AME communities continue to work hard to improve the situation and support those affected. But again, this comes with a caveat that our response time to queries are slower than I would like. And this is due to the very high volumes of inquiries that are going on. So please bear with us. On the pilot medical declaration side, the system is now working. We had a small number that required resubmission to verify the category that was declared. That's the 5.7 versus the 2-ton categories. But we were well supported here by the community. So thank you for that. And those issues, again, are largely resolved. So my closing remarks then, we are going through a digital revolution. That is undeniable. It is necessary, it's unavoidable, and it has been painful for all of us. I'm sorry about that, but it is getting better. And I promise that we will reap the benefits. It will help us to help you and safeguard the activity we love. So please bear with us. And on my final note, I'd like to close with another of my aeroplanes that I've had the pleasure of owning. It's moved on now to a better owner. It was complex, it was hard work and full of bugs to start with, but in the end, it was a joy. And let's hope that Selma follows a similar track. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you one day. Thank you very much.
Mike, thank you very much. And I would really like to echo the words there on Selma. Mike is right. We are on a bit of a journey at the CAA to modernise a lot of our services. We need to do that. I think the business case that Mike outlined at the beginning there was really clear. But when we do this, our aim is that we do it without causing stress or delays or pain in the community. And we know with Selma, we didn't fully get that right. I hope you're reassured by some of the words there from Mike. A lot has already been fixed, and you can see the root causes that cause some of the issues across the portal or across Selma. But we have a way to go, but there is a team that are working day and night to get all that stuff fixed. So we're now going to move to another topic that I also know has a big impact on the community, and one you're very keen to hear from us on, and that's licensing. We're going to start by looking at the actual journey that your license goes on when you apply for a license at the CAA, and we're joined by Martine, who's going to talk us through that, some of the pain points in that process, and some of the things we're doing to try and alleviate those. So over to you, Martine. Thanks for being with us this evening.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So just to introduce myself, I am Martine Freeman. I am the Head of Aviation Services in the CAA Shared Service Centre, and my teams include those that process all of the licences. So we thought it'd be really good today to take you through a little bit of an update and how the licences are actually processed within the Shared Service Centre. Okay, so first of all, I thought it would be good just to give you a little bit of an overview of the Shared Service Centre. So we provide a range of services that essentially underpin the UK's aviation safety framework, and we're the starting point for most of the CAA processes, where the first line of regulatory control and safety regulation begins at the application stage. So we handle all sorts of applications for various processes, including licenses, certificates, approvals, permits and permissions. We have 14 different teams and they specialise in a number of different subjects. However, our key aims and key focuses are streamlining and modernising processes, creating best practice and placing a focus on customer service and service excellence. Okay, so let's take a closer look at flight crew licensing. Our Shared Service Centre licensing teams are made up of 3 different work streams. We have our licensing support who carry out the administrative activity. We then have our licensing officers who perform the application regulatory assessment, and we also have our technical support who deal with the more kind of technically natured inquiries and applications, as well as referrals and quality checks. There are many different pilot licence types with different class and type ratings which can be gained through various different training routes. This means that the training of our licensing officers does require a lot of knowledge, and it can take us up to around 12 months to really fully train all of our officers. The training is conducted through a combination of kind of formal classroom training and also practical training, with each module of training passed by sitting a written exam. A licensing officer can progress to become a technical officer, and that can take another 12 months to be fully trained again through a similar style of modular style training and passing written exams. But noting that kind of the more rare and complex applications or queries can take much longer to learn, and those are really learnt or built on through experience. Okay, so moving on to applications themselves. Here's a typical flight crew licensing application journey. So the application is sent in to us by the applicant, and that can arrive via email, via our online application process, or via the post. The application goes to our licensing support team and it is pre-screened at this point. This is for administrative checks, so such as making sure signatures are in the right places, we have the correct forms. So it's not an assessment of the regulatory requirements at this point. After it's pre-screened, it's passed through to the licensing officers. That's where the full regulatory assessment will be made. If any information is missing or any further information is required, the application is placed on hold and the applicant is advised of what is missing or what information may be required. Once the licensing officer is satisfied that the application meets the regulatory requirements, the licence is issued and dispatched. There are some applications that may require a technical referral or could also be selected for a random quality check. Okay, so let's take a look at how long it takes us to process an application. We aim to complete the full assessment of applications within 10 working days, and you'll see a graph on the slide showing the detail over the last few months, noting that earlier in the year throughout lockdown when volumes were much lower, our processing time was much lower than it has been in recent times. The average through the summer months this year has taken between 8 to 10 working days. We also receive a lot of correspondence in terms of general inquiries, and we do acknowledge that sometimes these take longer than expected. We aim to respond to the more standard inquiries within 10 working days and those of a more complex nature within 30 working days. These are handled by the same licensing teams, and at times we do have to make a priority decision to process applications over emails, and this can mean at times our correspondence may take longer. As mentioned on the previous slide, some applications are placed on hold where we don't have access to all of the information required to make the decision to issue the licence. This slide details some of the top reasons that applications are placed on hold. You'll notice, for instance, the top reason here showing a number of 467 is where we haven't received a certified copy of the licence. The reason we ask for this is because, unfortunately, not all examiner report forms are received by the CAA, and this means that our records of all licences held may not be completely up to date where a rating has been signed up onto the licence in the field. So this is really important to make sure that we get the copy of the certified copy of the licence to ensure that when we issue the new licence that it is current and up to date. You'll see some various other reasons on here. In the box at the top are some of the top reasons, and then some of the other reasons are also shown below. Okay, so moving on, after looking at the reasons applications are placed on hold, let's look at how we can improve this. Firstly, we do always recommend that applicants visit our website for the most up-to-date information relating to applications, as around about 50% of applications are placed on hold, which can often mean the application takes much longer to process than is expected. We do acknowledge that there is room to improve our own processes, and there is already work underway to improve this, such as we've got workshops and trials taking place within our teams where we're looking at a case ownership. This would mean that a licensing officer will actually handle the full application from start to finish and telephone the applicant rather than email them to see if we can process the application on the same day rather than it taking several days to receive the correct information. We're also in the process of upgrading many of our application forms. Historically, we've had manual PDF paper application forms, and we're looking to move those online where we can also improve the right first time metrics. We've already had 15 forms converted to an online, and we've got 20 more due to be withdrawn by the end of this year. Please don't worry, because we always do communicate first, and we do have an 8-week transition period. One of the other improvements we're looking to do is to introduce an application tracker. We have just recently launched that for our EU to UK conversion process. This means that an applicant will receive an automated email whenever their application changes status at the CAA, such as when it's been received, if it's been initially assessed, if it's placed on hold for any reason. Once this has been tested on this particular process, we will look to expand it out to other application types as well. A combination of CAA process improvements and more applicant accuracy should see applications processed quicker with more efficiency. Okay, and coming on to my last slide, I did just want to touch on the EU to UK conversions. As you may already know, as of the 1st of April this year, holders of EU Part FCL licences have been able to apply to convert their EASA licence to a UK Part FCL. In doing so, they would then hold an EASA and UK Part FCL concurrently. I have listed out here on the slide some of the key information and documents that are required for these applications. And there is also a link shown to both the licence application process and the medical application process, as both of these are two separate applications that need to be submitted. Whilst we're talking on EU and UK conversions, I thought it was worth noting that we do acknowledge that some applications are taking longer than may be expected. Applications for this process do go through various stages because there is a verification that is required from the current EASA member state. And whilst we know that several thousand pilots transferred out prior to us leaving the EU last year, we did anticipate that many of those would want to hold a UK licence. However, we were unable to anticipate how that application might be phased over the 2-year period. So it does mean we're dealing with unexpected demands. We have recently recruited some additional resources who are currently undergoing training, and we aim to process these licences in a more timely fashion as we move forwards. Thank you very much for your time today, and I will now pass back over to Sophie.
Martine, thank you very much. And I hope some of the detail there was useful and did highlight to all of you that we do understand where some of the pain points are, and there are a number of ideas that are going on there to look to improve some of our processes. So Martine really talked about the process there, but she also touched on the EU to UK transition. And what we're going to do now is hand over to Jermaine, who's one of the new managers in the RPAS and GA unit, just to talk to us a bit about some of the longer term plans for the future of licensing in the UK. So Jermaine, thank you for being with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Sophie, and good evening to everybody. This is just a very quick view as to acknowledge where we are and some of the impacts that we've had since the UK left the EU. I think this community in particular have been at the sharp end of this, both from in terms of impacts to flying, but also hopefully to feel the benefits of some of the opportunities that come from this as well. So firstly, just to acknowledge, there has been some impacts on the general aviation space. For example, the LAPL is no longer accepted in EASA airspace. This is because it's a sub-ICAO license. Other impacts have been, so the EIR, the en route instrument rating, again, is no longer accepted in EASA airspace because this is a sub-ICAO rating. And those aircraft with a national permit to fly also have been impacted. And, you know, so that's on some of the more challenging impacts of the UK leaving the EU. But there are also some positives, some of which I will talk about later in a later section. One of the positives is that the UK now can look and review its licensing regime, which is something that has been fed back to us as an area where we want to simplify and improve. There is also an opportunity, there's also been the opportunity for the UK to allow more freedom with medical declarations, which can now be used for Part 21 aircraft. And just as a point to note, again, referring back to the LAPL, ICAO are currently looking at a recreational license. And we've got a couple of members of the CAA who are sitting on that panel for personnel licensing. So we are actively involved in this, and it gives us the opportunity to make sure that we are aligned with our version of the LAPL with anything that ICAO comes out. And we do see that as an opportunity in the future. Thank you, Sophie.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Jermaine. And as Jermaine said, we're going to come back to some of the aspects around licensing as we recap on the GA change programme, which we're going to do now. So you may remember back in March, we talked to you about the consultation that we ran in December 2020, where we asked you what you thought some good things would be for us to work on since we're leaving the EU, and what you would like us to, or what programme you would really like us to build of work in the coming year. So you may remember this slide. We launched the consultation in November, we closed it on the 18th of December, and then in March I highlighted to you all of the different programmes that came out of that work. And what we had is we had strategic programmes and we had tactical. And some of you will know this, the strategic programmes tend to be work that's more complex in nature. So it often involves sort of multiple teams at the CAA, working with government, working with all of you, and it will often be multi-year in how we aim to deliver the programme. We also then have some tactical work projects, which are just as important as the strategic ones, but they tend to be slightly less complex, often more on a single topic. So we aim to deliver them more quickly. And what I'm going to do today is take you through all the things that we've delivered in the tactical programme since March, and then I'm going to hand you back to Jermaine to talk to you about the strategic programmes and what approach we're taking there for multi-year delivery. So the first thing that we were able to do is our Skyway code, which we believe is very popular. You often give us good feedback about it. We have finished the first draft of another version of the Skyway code that we're going to create, but for GA airworthiness. And we are aiming to launch this by the end of the financial year. So by that, I mean next April, we plan to get that out. And that's really very much aligned to our strategy on improving communications and getting clear messages out to the community wherever we can. So in a similar way, we've also launched one of our new safety sense leaflets about care of passengers. That came out on the 16th of July. If you haven't seen that, I do encourage you to go and have a look at that. Similarly, we also launched a special article in Clued Up around active carbon monoxide detectors. We wanted to increase awareness around those and the use that we think they have. And to support that article, we've also released a survey because we want to understand levels of interest from you in the community about how often you use active detectors, what you think of them, and that's going to help shape our work in that area. So in a similar vein to improving communications, we've also done an all-up review of our General Aviation Partnership meeting. And that's the meeting we have once a quarter where we meet with our key GA stakeholders. And normally we talk about things like the GA change programme, we have an update from government. But what we've also done as an outcome of the review is we're now going to have a specific section in each meeting on each of the different disciplines within GA, because GA is not just GA, as you all know. Your concerns or your recent successes if you're a balloonist versus if you're operating an ex-military aircraft, they're very different. So we're going to have something called Community and Spotlight, where we actually go around each community for each of our GAP meetings. We look at what are the individual successes and concerns so that we can really tailor some of our work to those different areas. Equally aligned to our strategy for greater delegation, we have just finished our first draft as to how we plan to delegate some additional authority to the BGA, the British Gliding Association. We plan to finalise that by the end of the year. Earlier in August, we completed work on our new microlight classification. So this was really quite a significant reform to the microlight market. And what it does is it raises the weight limit and the stalling speed for single and factory built light aeroplanes with up to 2 seats that are eligible for national A&O regulation. And that's actually a combination of about 3 years worth of work. So that was delivered in August and that went into law in that month. Finally, and aligned to our strategy to modernise, so I've talked about our strategy for clearer communications, for more delegation, now turning to our one to modernise, which Selma also very much fitted into. We have launched a number of our theoretical knowledge exams online. So the first one we did was back in October 2020, where we took the PPLA and the PPLH exam, and we put that onto a live platform and moved that off paper-based exams. There are a number of reasons that we thought that was a good idea. Of course, it's to modernise, but also to enhance the security of the question bank. There's less administration in going online for printing and distributing papers. It means you don't have to come to the Gatwick office. You can do tests in remote locations. And we thought, for those reasons, it was a good idea to do that. I'm pleased to say that as of last week, 10,000 exams have actually been taken on our online platform, and we're seeing an average pass mark of 87%. So these are some examples of all the deliverables that we've managed to get across the line in the last 5 or 6 months. I thought it was worth talking you through those, because the aim with the tactical projects is that we deliver at pace. So we hope that you can see that we've been doing that. There will be some more things coming out in the coming months as well. We're going to have an edition of the Clued Up magazine that's specifically for historic aircraft and that community coming out. We believe at the end of October is what we're aiming for that. And equally, look out for Project TEL. Pauline knows all about this, but that's where we're supporting DFT, the LAA and AOPA to look at where we've got infrastructure that can take unleaded fuel at airfields around the UK, and equally what GA engines can safely take unleaded fuel as well, to encourage that movement from leaded to unleaded. So I'm now going to pass you back to Jermaine and talk you through the 3 strategic programmes. At a high level, what we're doing here is we're looking at options for GA licensing simplification. Equally, for the airworthiness maintenance side of GA, we're also looking at the options to simplify that, and looking at how we can continue the use of PMD and improve that, because we know that's something you tell us that you rely on and find particularly of use. So over to you, Jermaine.
Thank you, Sophie. So as Sophie described, the nature of strategic projects is a step-changing capability really for the organisation. On the right-hand side of this slide, just wanted to give you a little overview of what the team structure looks like. So I'm the transformation manager, and then within my team, I've got a number of subject matter experts and policy officers to support licensing, to support RPAS initiatives as well, both of which I'll talk about in a moment. But along with that, we've got some professional project management support, and also we've got business analysts. So this is a as an overview and as a team, we've got lots of capabilities focused on the transformational aspects of our work. Next slide, please. So the first project to talk about is the licensing simplification project. It came through as the most popular area from the CAP 1985 consultation. It's an area that we needed to focus on, and we've been asked to focus on by the community. Just to highlight some of the problem areas, so we've got 2 systems now that we have left the EU, multiple routes, complex and sometimes overlapping regulations, which does not make this an attractive proposition, particularly for our younger aviators and those coming into the market. So what we want to do here is to review the current regulations, and working with internal and external stakeholders as part of the change panel to propose ways that we can simplify and rationalise our licensing regime in the UK, which in turn should support the growth of grassroots aviation, something that the Secretary of State is very passionate about. Next slide, please. The second of the strategic projects is along a similar vein. It's the simplification and rationalisation of maintenance regulations. So once again, we've got 2 regimes in this space. The feedback is that this is a cumbersome process, and it can be challenging for aircraft owners to certify individual parts such as propellers. So what we want to do here is to, again, review the current regulatory landscape, propose options for simplification and rationalisation, again within that safety framework. For everything that we do, safety is paramount. but whilst supporting the growth of especially aircraft ownership in this space and maintenance. Next slide, please. And then within this space, the third element is the review of medical declarations, the pilot medical declaration process, which is very popular and we're not looking to remove. However, we do have a responsibility to make sure that when we are audited as a government organisation, it is a robust system built on strong foundations. So we will be doing a review of the current process, and where we've identified there are some potential risks, looking to improve or mitigate those. Next slide, please. Along with the strategic projects that are directly affected by or looking at the GA community, we've got 2 projects that are more in the RPAS space. So one is looking at the implementation of certified category. This is a complex undertaking and straddles a number of areas, including the need to implement remote pilot licensing, initial and ongoing airworthiness standards for the certified category, and also aircraft operations. So we'll be looking to implement a system built upon existing rules and regulations that we've got in place, but that will cover the RPAS space. And the final slide, please. This is looking at beyond visual line of sight, routine beyond visual line of sight operations in non-segregated airspace. Again, there's lots of activity in this space for multiple quarters, but what we're lacking is a clear roadmap and an understanding of the dependencies. There's a number of different moving parts that need to come together in order for us to be able to enable this capability. And not least working with other regulators such as Ofcom. So the objective of this project is to provide that clear roadmap, the ambition being to enable BVLOS in non-segregated airspace by 2024. Next slide, please. So in terms of the approach and the timeline, we have there are a number of stages that we are following, and in terms of the methodology that we're following here, it's we want to be more as agile as we can be. So the licensing project is in discovery, which means that we are actively working. We've got the working groups established, and we're looking to address the problem statements. And as I said, we've got internal and external stakeholders as part of that working group, looking to move that forward. The other projects that I've talked about are in pre-discovery, which is where we are preparing to move into the discovery phase. So understanding the budgets, understanding the working structures, identifying our initial problem statements, and making sure that we've got the appropriate resources in place. Once we've gone through those phases, and as you can see, we've got some quite aggressive timelines here, it will then move into consultations, because what is being proposed is our options papers. And these will come out to the community so that everybody has an opportunity to look at what's being proposed and has an opportunity to feedback to us in a timely manner, so that we can then consider the feedback and make any adjustments as required. The timescale for consultation, we've got it here as a 3-month period because we do want to make progress. However, this can be adjusted should we feel that, or should the community inform us that they want more time to consult and consider what is being proposed. Once that has closed, we will then move into the implementation phase, which again takes us into this multi-year perspective. Along with the internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, we're working closely with ExCo, our colleagues in DFT, and legal team. We've got stakeholder support as well. Next slide, please. Finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the change panel, which is where we've drawn our external subject matter experts from. They are there to be part of the working group. So what I hope will be visible to everybody, that this is not just a CAA view. We are drawing upon the knowledge from various aspects of the GA community to ensure that what we are proposing, or what is being proposed, as part of the options, really does consider and understands the nuances of the various parts of the GA community, which is extremely broad. in terms of membership and people that we've got, we're including Phil Dunnington, people from Nick Wilcock, who's from EOPA. We've also got examiners, instructors, students, all part of our working group, so that we get that really broad perspective and factor in the needs of what our current student population, as well as people who've been aviators and working in aviation for a significant amount of time. Thank you very much. That's the end of my slideshow, and I'll hand back to Sophie.
Brilliant, thank you, Jermaine, and I hope that was informative about how we're going to be working very much with the community. Jermaine kicked off that expert panel, I believe it was today, Jermaine, and that's very much going to be how we shape with you what we think the best way to do licensing and other longer term areas are in the UK. So I'm delighted that we now have got the chair of the CAA, so Stephen Hillier, is joining us for an address. I know Stephen's going to talk to you about a number of topics, but critically about our engagement with you as a community, and he is going to touch on the independent review panel that's recently been set up, as we know a lot of you have had some questions around that. So Stephen, over to you, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Sophie. And can I just do a quick check and give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay, Sophie? Excellent, great. Well, as I say, good evening, everybody, and I'm absolutely delighted to be participating again in the virtual Voyage session. Thank you for all for participating this evening, and thank you to the CAA team who put all the effort in to organise these events and indeed to present you with what I hope you found has been very useful information. These sessions for me are important. They're important because they're a vital part of our engagement. And right from the start of my time as chair of the CAA, I've emphasised that engagement. And it's partly so that we can understand what the issues are within all of the sectors that we regulate, but it's also so we can explain what we are trying to do to deal with issues, and where we can't deal with issues in the way that people might wish is to explain why in relation to the authorities we have and the environment that we're working in. Let me just firstly turn then to my background. I spent most of my career in the Royal Air Force as a fast jet pilot. It's what I always wanted to do, and I had the opportunity to fly mainly fast jets, but also multi-engine aircraft, rotary wing aircraft, a huge variety of types all around the world, and it was, you know, a fantastic experience. But my background in aviation is actually in general aviation. Those were my foundations when I was 17 years old, a flying scholarship with the Air Training Corps, and then moved on to my private pilot's license, flying from Leicester and then from Prestwick back in my native Scotland. And I don't claim in any way to be a general aviation expert. I'm absolutely conscious that there are hundreds on the line this evening who have much more general aviation experience than I have. But I think I have some insight at least. And what I certainly believe I have is a lot of experience in aviation supervision and operating in a regulated, tightly regulated environment. In terms of my priorities for the Civil Aviation Authority, well, you know, it was an absolute pleasure to me to be able to apply for the role as chair of the Civil Aviation Authority. Given that background in civil aviation right from my earliest days, it really felt like the opportunity to complete a circle and hopefully bring my aviation experience, as well as my wider experience of running large organisations and the aerospace enterprise, to the benefit of civil aviation in this country. I started off with three key principles for my role in the CAA. The first is about the independence of the CAA, and that is independence to make our decisions in an unbiased way, based on the evidence, based on judgments, and be very clear about why we make the decisions that we make. But that independence is not about isolation. That is about engaging, as I've already said. That's a critical part of what we do. Excuse me. Moving on to leadership. Now, I'm not claiming that the Civil Aviation Authority somehow leads aerospace in the UK. In fact, nobody actually leads that effort overall. But what I am saying is that the CAA has an important leadership role to perform, and that's both in relation to if you like, moral leadership, setting the tone for the just culture, through to being an exemplar of the way we're trying to approach aviation in the UK. Excuse me. it's about being an exemplar in relation to delegation. I'll come back to delegation shortly as well. So it's leadership which doesn't rely on our authority. It's about leadership which again engages with those that we regulate. And the final principle is in relation to inclusivity. Now, inclusivity, I mean a CAA for all in every respect, and that's both in terms of ensuring that aerospace is open to as many people as possible, but also ensuring that we treat all sectors as users of aerospace, part of the aviation endeavour, and trying to treat everybody in an equitable way. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody always gets what they want. I mean, life's just not like that, but it's ensuring that we have proper consideration of all users and all needs. And where we make decisions, again, explain why we make decisions. Moving on from the principles, just a little bit about my philosophy as a regulator. As I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of spent a lot of time in supervisory roles in relation to aerospace. My first principle, or first part of my philosophy, is that the primary responsibility for safety does not lie with the CAA. It lies with those who are actually delivering the activity. And what I want to make sure is that we create a regulatory environment which reinforces that. And yes, there's always going to be a regulatory environment. That's a sort of framework based on sort of decades of experience of aviation. But it's those who are actually doing the activity day to day who are primarily responsible for safety. It follows then on to my second part of my philosophy is that delegation is important to me. Now, I appreciate this is always a hot topic. What delegation is about is not it's not something which, if you like, comes by right. It has to be based on the evidence, and the evidence has to be that those who we are delegating responsibility to have the capacity, and that's both in terms of people, but also the knowledge to ensure that they can appropriately look after their safety responsibilities. And delegation isn't about independence. Delegation continues to be subject to assurance and oversight, and the CAA will continue to provide that because ultimately we remain the statutory authority, statutory in relation to our accountability to Parliament for the overall safety of the UK airspace system. But I come back to the point that delegation is important, and we will delegate wherever it is sought, wherever we believe that it can be conducted successfully, because that again reinforces the idea about who's responsible for delivering safety. And the final part of my philosophy is about proportionality, and that is proportionality to the risks involved in the task, and its proportionality in relation to the performance of those who have that delegated responsibility. That's a key part of how we approach our work. Let me move on then to current issues. And current issues, one is actually, I guess, in a way tied to those overall priorities and that philosophy. And that I would describe as the duality of the CAA's role. And right from the start of my time in the CAA, it's something that I've been very clear in emphasizing, is that we have clearly one part of our remit is that core regulatory role. The other part of our remit, though, is to have a responsibility for enabling the aerospace enterprise within the United Kingdom, and indeed working with colleagues internationally as well. Now, it's important that we get the right balance between those two roles, and it's important that we don't let enabling bleed across into the regulatory role. But nevertheless, we need to work to ensure that both of those roles are conducted successfully. Within that, then, current issues, COVID, clearly COVID recovery, the pace and the character of that recovery will vary across aerospace endeavour in the UK, but nevertheless, it remains a key issue, and we remain absolutely focused on ensuring that in the midst of this public health crisis and the recovery from it, that safety and security and where appropriate consumer interests do not in any way get forgotten about. It continues to be vital. An issue is post withdrawal from the EU and from the EASA system. I appreciate there are a lot of concerns and issues, and we've certainly been working extremely hard throughout this year to deal with them. And those issues are going to continue on. It's not through lack of application on our part, but we need to be clear about where we have the authority to deal with issues and where we're trying to influence other nations. And sometimes those other nations don't always want to do things either in the way or at the pace that we want to. But nevertheless, we're working hard on that, but there's much more to come in that post-EASA environment. The next point is about, well, getting ready for the future. And the future, it comes at us in any number of respects. It might be the sustainability agenda, it might be to do with drones, it might be to do with space and our new responsibilities there, enabling new technology, however we wish to describe it. But there's a lot on, and it's a fast-changing environment, and we need to we are and that we're creating the environment to enable aerospace to continue to be successful in the future. Finally, then, just one issue which, as Sophie mentioned, she wanted me to touch on, and I know very many of you are interested in as well, is the independent review panel. This came out of work originally, best part of a year ago within the CAA. I was concerned about how we handled appeal complaints against how we do our business. And so we put in place a new system now. Level 1 is to make it very clear that how you complain to those who have been handling whatever issue you have cause for concern. We then put in a very structured level 2, and level 2 is handling of that complaint by somebody within the CAA, independent of those who have been dealing with your case so far. And then level 3 is an independent body outside the Civil Aviation Authority, which will look at the case. That 3 levels is something which is typical in any consumer customer facing organization, which is why we were was keen to put that in place. I just need to be careful though, or clear about the responsibilities of that level 3, which is, needless to say, subject of interest. And I'm just going to quote from the headline government announcement, which said an independent review panel is to be created to review complaints against CAA decision process. And that decision process is really important. The CAA will continue to be the authority for making safety-based decisions. That is our responsibility to Parliament. So the review and the complaints process is about the decision-making process rather than the safety decision itself. Nevertheless, we're in the process of setting that up at the moment. More details to come in due course. But the final thing I just need to emphasize in relation to that complaints process is I really don't want to get into those 3 tiers. I want to ensure that we deal with people in a way which is appropriate, consistent with the just culture, in a manner which everybody can properly engage with. And we clearly want people to engage with us in exactly the same terms, so we don't ever get into that complaints territory. That's got to be the goal from the start. And I know that colleagues in the CAA are absolutely committed to following that path as much as they possibly can within the authorities and the responsibilities that we have. That's all from me, Sophie. Very much look forward to the questions in the panel session now.
Stephen, thank you very much, and I hope that was helpful for the community. I know everyone was keen to understand just a bit more context about that independent review panel, how it might work, and the scope that it does have, and as you say, the ideal that we aren't getting to complaints in the first place, and that very much is our aim. So in the previous virtual voyage, we talked to you about the Skywise platform and how much we use that to communicate with you. That's going to go through a refresh. So before we come on to our Q&A and our panel, where we'll be welcoming back Sir Stephen, we have Nathan with us from our content team, just to give us an update on how Skywise is changing. So Nathan, over to you.
Thanks, Sophie. So we're going to talk now a little bit about our Skywise notification service. And as it says here on the slide, Skywise is a way for you to stay up to date with the latest information that we publish that's relevant to your role or the type of approval that you hold. So the idea behind Skywise is that you just receive the information that's relevant to you. And we've got some examples here of some of the types of information you can expect to receive through Skywise. So you may get notifications about new guidance, publications that have been issued or updates to our website, information about restricted airspace alerts, which could be due to events or displays that are taking place, details about changes to rules or regulations, consultations such as the carbon monoxide one that we notified a lot of people about in September, and also details of upcoming events. You may have, if you're already registered with Skywise, you may have even found out about this event via a Skywise notification. So it's important to stress at this point that Skywise shouldn't be viewed as a one-stop shop for all information from the CAA. So CAA uses a separate system for safety critical information. So some of the information that you can expect to find through that system, we're talking about things like safety directives, safety notices, airworthiness directives. So we'll publicize the address for the Skywise website after this session. And on the homepage of the Skywise website, you've got information about how to register both with Skywise, but also for this safety critical service. So I definitely recommend that if you're not already using the safety critical service, that you sign up and register for that, because there's some key information that we send through that you won't find on Skywise. And here's an example of what a Skywise notification looks like. So the concept behind this is really, as I'm sure most people are aware, the CAA can publish a lot of detailed information, sometimes that can be very lengthy. And the idea of Skywise is just to really distill that down into a headline and just a summary of what's been published. And you can then take the decision on whether that's something that you need to go and get more detail on. And if you do, there'll be a link to more information, which, as I mentioned on the first slide, could be an update to the website or a publication. So here's an example of one that we sent out again around the carbon monoxide detector trial in September. You can see there's a clear headline that will come through on your email or on your app if you're using the app. And you'll get a summary, which is always 100 words or less, that give you an idea of what's happened and why. And then there's a link to the more detailed information if you want to click through to it. So it allows you to very quickly and easily keep track of what we're publishing for you, and then you can go and read more information on it when you have time, or if it's something that is relevant to you. So as again mentioned, this setting up Skywise was really a response to feedback that we were getting from people like you, where often it was quite hard to pick out the pieces that were relevant to individual roles or individual types of license holders. So what we've done with Skywise is really to try and target and tailor the information as much as we can. And there are 30 different categories that you can sign up for on Skywise, and those include the following GA categories that you can see listed here. And we're always reviewing those and keeping them monitoring those. So again, please get in touch with us if you feel that there's a gap, or if you feel like there's something not quite right with the categories that we do have. We're always keen to have feedback from users and to keep changing and keep improving the system based on how you're finding it. Also really important to stress that there are 3 different ways to use Skywise. We've tried to keep this as flexible as possible because we know that people have different preferences about how they receive information. So you can receive notifications by email, which is very sort of traditional way that the CAA has used of getting information out. The safety critical service that we mentioned right at the beginning is an email subscription service, and you can use Skywise in the same way if you choose to. So you just register your email, and then you'll receive an email every time that we publish something that relates to one of the categories you've chosen. You can alternatively, or as well as, you can download the Skywise app onto your phone. And again, that will then just give you an alert on your phone each time we publish something that we think is relevant to you. Or you can visit the Skywise website, and no subscription is required for that. So you can, whenever you want to check in with that, you'll find every alert that we publish on Skywise that's been published over the last 12 months. You can find details of all of that information on the Skywise website. So as I mentioned, Skywise was set up based on the feedback that we were getting from you, and we're keen to keep that going. All the changes that we've made in the 5 years that Skywise has been running has been based on user feedback, and making this, really wanting to ensure that this works for you. So if you have any questions or suggestions, there's also opportunities to get involved in future rounds of testing as we carry on working to evolve and improve the system. The email address to get hold of our team is content@caa.co.uk. So please get in touch if you've got any questions, if you've anything that you'd like to talk to us about, or any difficulties that you've had using the system, and we'll be happy to help. Thanks very much, and back to you, Sophie.
Thank you very much much, Nathan, for joining us. So now we are going to move on to our live Q&A panel. Hopefully we won't have any technical issues with this, famous last words. So Pauline is joining us from AOPA to help me manage this. So Pauline, thank you very much for joining us. I know probably everybody on the call knows you, but perhaps you could start by just telling us a bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll come to you for the first question, if that's all right.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And I'll start by actually saying thank you very much to the CAA for inviting AOPA to this event. I'm chairman of the board of AOPA, which is actually called something different, but it trades as AOPA UK. We're part of an international organisation representing the rights and, well, lobbying the government and the DfT and the CAA, but protecting the rights and privileges of aircraft owners and pilots. It says what it does on the tin. We've been doing this for over 50 years now and have some significant successes to our name, one of which we like to take great pride in was the IMC rating, which came out of what is now our Training and Education Committee. We are a not-for-profit organisation, which obviously in these days does present its challenges, as does we are a membership organisation, and again that presents some challenges for the future. Myself personally, I started gliding in 1981. I converted, because you could in those days, to a PPL in 1987, and I'm just about to get my currency back and still, yes, exercise the rights and privileges of holding a PPL. Personally, my thing for flying is touring. Been around a lot of Europe, Marrakesh, Albania, and done a lot of flying in the US. So that's me, really. Secondly, having thanked the CAA, I'd like to thank our AOPA members who took the time to send in their questions. There are too many, obviously, for us to cover this evening, but I want them to be reassured that they will all be answered. They will all receive an answer. When I go through some of these questions, just a bit of housekeeping, I will be using the pronoun I, and that doesn't necessarily mean me, it's the member talking. So these are not my questions, they are our members' questions. Thank you. Would you like me to start?
Yes, and that's fully understood. Thank you, Pauline, and thank you for making that point. Just to reiterate that, we did get over 100 questions in the last series of Virtual Voyage. We weren't able to answer throughout the session, so we followed up with you over email. We'll do exactly the same this time. So as Pauline says, anything we don't get to, we will follow up with you on. So yes, Pauline, please do kick off.
We've already touched on one or two of the topics I have here. Licensing. Why have we got to change our UK issued EASA Part FCL license for a UK Part FCL within 5 years of Brexit at the exorbitant cost, and I think this is the point, of £77 that has been mooted?
Thank you, Pauline. So, John, I'm going to suggest I come to you for that, but then, Sir Stephen, I might suggest that we just talk a bit more broadly about, you know, the relationship we've had with the EU since we've left that organisation. So, John, I'll come to you first, and then, Sir Stephen, I'll come to you to follow up. That's all right.
Okay. Right. Unfortunately, the authority, or depending which way you look at it, is funded by the users of its service. So unfortunately, we do have to charge an administrative charge at least for any transactions that we complete, including this. However, it's hoped the majority of individuals will, before the end of the 5 years period, have already obtained a new format license. They can achieve this by completing any normal sort of transactions such as ratings, renewals and things like that. And that would mean that they would not have to go through this pain, unfortunately. This is one of the consequences of coming out, that we have to remove the European Union from the licence eventually.
John, thank you. So, Stephen, is there anything you'd like to add just about sort of our negotiations since we've left?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So just to back up the point that John mentioned at the end there, I mean, there are clearly consequences of leaving the EU and leaving EASA. In terms of the work that we've been doing, really since 2016, but certainly in the last year and leading up to 31st of December last year, then we've been trying to ease the transition as much as we possibly can. But we do have to remember that we are not the only actors here. We are reliant on EASA and indeed individual nations wanting to do things, and clearly they have their own priorities and won't necessarily respond immediately to our priorities. So that's an issue there. Overall relationships with EASA, we continue to share a common goal for the safest aerospace operation within European skies, even though we're not part of the EU anymore. But we do need to recognise that EASA is an EU body, and that the EU therefore looks at many of the issues that we're dealing with in the light of the whole deal. And so a lot of issues are referred back to the European Commission, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a difficulty, but it takes extra time as well. And we're going to continue to have those issues to work through for some considerable time yet. So I'll just emphasize that we absolutely understand the concerns that people have, the friction that it potentially causes, the delays that it potentially causes. We are working as hard as possible to ensure that we ease those issues, but we are not in complete control of our destiny. As I say, other nations are involved. What I would say is that I think we're aware of most of what the issues are, but we always need to understand whether there are new issues arising. So please keep informing us of those problems that people might be and organisations might be experiencing, because it all adds weight potentially to our arguments. And then just to back up that point that John mentioned is, I absolutely appreciate there are costs involved in this, but we generate costs in dealing with these issues. I mean, there is a considerable resource penalty on the CAA, and we are an organisation based on those who are regulated pays, and I'm afraid that's just an unfortunate reality for many.
Brilliant, thank you, Stephen. Pauline, back to you.
Right, I think this one actually builds on the previous question. When I changed my for life CAA license to an EASA Part FCL license, I ticked the box to also get a UK license at the same time. Does that UK license mean I don't have to get yet another license within 5 years of Brexit?
Okay, thank you, Pauline. That's a good question. John, I'm going to come straight to you for that one.
Right. Unfortunately, in this particular case, it sounds as though the individual has two licenses. One issued under the Air Navigation Order and the other issued in accordance with the retained European legislation, which is now coming to UK law as UK Part FCL. As this license is most probably in the EASA format, they're going to have to exchange it within the 5 years to the UK Part FCL format, because that particular license will be the one which will deal with Part 21 aircraft, and therefore when they're going outside the UK, it will be the required license.
Thank you, John. And Pauline, if I could just add before I come back to you, this is why we really believe that the licensing simplification and rationalisation project is so key, because as much as John has very clearly explained the scenario, there is a lot of complexity in the system, and we were being given that feedback from the community before we had the additional complexity of coming out of the EU. So that for us is really part of the business case as to why we need to simplify and to rationalise and create some sort of potentially sort of staircasing process where you can start with the license and then add as you go in a much simpler way than currently you do.
Thank you. And I'm glad John mentioned Part 21 aircraft, because the next question is, I am keen to know when the CAA and EASA will make it possible again for LAPLs, I don't think I need to explain that, to fly Part 21 aircraft to Europe.
Yeah, we've had this question actually in quite a number of different ways. John, do you want to come in here?
Yes, currently it's a matter for the government to discuss as it's part of the free trade agreement of the 24th of December 2020. However, it must be appreciated that Article 59 of the Basic Regulation EU 2018-1139 only recognises third country licenses, ratings and certificates which are issued in accordance with the Chicago Convention. As the LAPL is not an ICAO compliant license, it's sub-ICAO, it is unlikely these licenses will be accepted in the future, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah, I can see that. Right, moving on. Although we're still on licensing, one question I and many other pilots have had to the CAA, apparently still unanswered for many weeks, is regarding the UK EASA transition impact. What is the end date when EASA Part FCL licenses, not state of license issued from a UK Part FCL license, gets complicated, issued before 31st of December 2020, cease to be treated as equivalent to UK issued Part FCL licenses?
Right. The reason why the licenses are accepted if they were issued before the 31st of December at the moment is because of the Withdrawal Act. So basically a non-UK issued EASA license ceases to be valid for G-registered aircraft basically at 23:59 hours on the 31st of December 2022. The general exemptions that we've issued for EU, EEA and Swiss licenses expire at this time. And this is based on the fact that the Withdrawal Act only gives 2 years from the date the UK left the European Union finally to accept those licenses as if issued by the UK CAA.
Thank you.
Pauline, back to you.
Okay, well, we're moving on now. What is the CAA doing and what support can they bring in supporting lobbying to government to prevent the continuing loss of so many airfields to redevelopment? An invaluable infrastructure to GA and wider society and the economy, which I feel will be lost, never to be recovered. A question that actually, for those of you who've known me some time, was quite close to my heart.
Brilliant, thank you, Pauline. So there's a number of points I'd quite like to cover here. It is a government objective to sustain the network of airfields in the UK. And that's why you've seen a number of things that have come from the CAA, such as the Airfield Advisory Team, where we provide non-regulatory guidance on things like operations, airspace, air traffic services, the impact on planning and what that could mean for your airfield, which is a particularly prevalent issue. And it's something that we continue to work with government on, and then also to be involved where we can provide meaningful feedback from an aviation perspective. So recent examples of this are around Coventry Airport, Chalgrave Airfield, where we have actually responded either to planning applications directly or liaised directly with those airfields. This is a difficult problem because we know that a lot of the airfields that we work with feel a particular revenue stream burden. And actually one of the things we've also tried to start looking at is when you look at some of the new innovations that are coming along through things like future flight or new types of aircraft or even drone operators. This is a matter that I know very well, where they're looking for a corridor to test different types of new drone operation, where they want to go from A to B, they don't want to do an A to A operation. Actually potentially working with airfields to see if there's opportunity there for new types of services is something that we're quite passionate about doing at the CAA, and one of the things we've been exploring in recent general aviation partnership meetings. So how we can try and encourage cross-stakeholder work to increase revenue streams, potentially supporting government with that objective, and some of the things you've seen come out of the CAA recently, like the Airfield Advisory Team or the Airfield Advisory Fund, where we did offer a number of business days through consultancy for airfields that applied for it to give some advice and guidance, is how we are planning to and actively supporting this area. So Stephen, is there anything you would like to add to this point?
No, Sophie, I think you've covered it very well indeed.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Pauline, any follow-up from you or any additional questions on this?
Well, Yes, I was interested to hear where we're at with Coventry. I genuinely, personally thought that was probably a done deal, but I gather there might be a reprieve. Is that correct?
So we have logged a complaint re Coventry. That was something that happened, I believe we did last week, but I would need to come back to you on where we are as of today.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think everybody is understanding of the fact that we need houses, but it seems airfields are designated or thought of as brownfield sites, and that makes them very easy for developers to tilt at. So yeah, I mean, I think Coventry, and then there's Wellesbourne, Mountford just down the road, and those are the last two remaining airfields in Warwickshire. So there you go. There won't be any, right? Now, we mentioned this slightly earlier on as well. What support lobbying to government is the CAA able to bring, and what are they doing regarding the looming potential withdrawal of Avgas 100LL, which would adversely affect most of the UK's GA fleet? And I will add to this, I know that AOPA and the Light Aircraft Association are working together on this. And certainly for AOPA's members, it is going to certainly adversely affect the fleet, the owners that we have as members. I mean, something like 80% of our membership has a stake or owns their own aircraft. And they tend to be certified aircraft.
Yeah, so this is something, and we talked about this briefly last time, I think, when we met Pauline, and something we know that, I mean, the CAA is taking a supporting role in Project TEL, which is what you're referring to there. Yes. So that project with DFT and the LAA and AOPA, and really that's part of kind of encouraging an overall move to unleaded, I guess. And what we're doing is there's a survey underway on Avgas and UL91, and we're trying to understand basically what airfields have got the infrastructure to safely provide unleaded and what GA engines can safely use unleaded. So that's kind of sort of a more broader understanding of what infrastructure is there and what engines can safely take at the moment for the overall sort of move to unleaded. But then when we sort of talk about the potential ban of TEL, this was something that was talked about under the EU, under its REACH regulation. This isn't something that was carried over into the UK. So what I can say at the moment is there isn't an impending ban that's automatically come over from the EU. But what we are doing is continuing to work with DFT because you know, it is recognised that lead is a toxic substance. And that's part of what Project TEL is really about, and us working with DFT on improving that space. And that's really where we are at the moment, Pauline.
Thank you very much. I know that we've known for a long time that it was going to be phased out, but as always, the work always starts in earnest when it looms. Right. The CAA's charges represent a cost burden to GA. AOPA's members mostly fly certified aircraft, as I just mentioned. What plans do the CAA have to reduce this burden? And then goes on to add more to the question. The hourly cost of flying means that people on average incomes cannot afford to fly. So if the intention is to make the UK the best place in the world for GA, surely tackling costs has to be a part of the solution. Aircraft ownership is at a price where average incomes cannot afford to buy even permit aircraft. Sustainability comes from activity, and as the activity levels reduce, so does the ability of GA to remain affordable. So I'll go back to the question, which was, what plans do the CAA have to reduce the cost burden of general aviation flying?
Thank you, Pauline. This is another question that we do get quite a lot. So Stephen, would you like me to bring you in first here, or there's a number of points I was going to make and then come to you? What would you prefer?
Yeah, well, let me just talk at the top level, Sophie. Is, you know, Pauline, absolutely understand the cost burden, and absolutely understand that in relation to the points that I mentioned earlier on about ensuring that aviation could be as inclusive as possible. and we don't want to price people out of the market. That's absolutely certain. However, we do have to cover our costs, and that is just that's a statutory requirement for us, and people are keen to ensure that we provide the best possible service and a timely service, and I'm afraid that costs money. If I can offer one thought, though, is that in terms of reducing that cost burden, it plays into the work which Sophie has been talking about, and which hopefully everybody's aware of, well, how do we end up with as slick and efficient as possible regulatory process, so that we can take layers out of the system. And if we were to be successful in doing that, then it would not only speed it up, but potentially, and I emphasize the word potentially, could require less resources. We would say we don't set out to increase our charges in order just to somehow to make more money. It's a reflection of the what we have to pay for in order to provide the service. But if we can do it in a more efficient way, then we're always looking to do that. So with that, Sophie, over to you.
Thank you, Sir Stephen. I mean, to be honest, they were sort of the key points that really I wanted to make to the community, is that our aim here is simplicity and rationalisation of some of the complexities in the system, because we are underpinned by a funding model where we are required to recover our costs against services to those we regulate. Simplicity and efficiency is the way that we see to potentially reducing some of that burden, and then potentially innovation, and some of the things I've already talked about today, Pauline, and how we might get some of our newer entrants to work with our network of airfields to potentially assist in looking for different revenue streams for those areas that are finding it quite difficult to stay in business at the moment. So it's those two things together that we hope will improve things in the longer term.
Thank you, Sophie. And it's something that's taxing AOPA at the moment. We're looking at the demographic, not that we have everybody's age on file, I hasten to add, but in general, I chair meetings, I go to meetings. A couple of weeks we've got our members working group, which will be on Zoom again this time. And you look at the people who attend those and you realize what the demographic is, and we seem to not be recruiting or being attractive to younger people, and we're looking at understanding why that is. I mean, it may be that if you walk into a flying club today and you look at the people who are there, perhaps they don't represent the kind of diversity that you are. And I think that's something that we want to change for our own organisation, but I think it's something that needs to change probably throughout GA.
Yes, fully support that, Pauline. And I mean, I think anything that AOPA does find there, we're very keen to hear that, the CAA. We have quite a large programme of work that we do in our STEM area. And equally, there's a lot that we're doing from a diversity perspective internally, because aviation across the board is perhaps not as diverse as we would all like it to be. And for us, very much part of making GA the best in the world is about making it accessible, simple, modern, and also diverse. So any help that you can give us with that, we would really appreciate.
Thank you, Sophie. I'm going to throw, I'm not sure whether you're expecting this question, but it sort of builds on what I've just said slightly. Can the CAA show the numbers of new PPLs issued over the last 5, 10 or 15 years? And can the CAA show the number of hours flown over the same time frame? And can the CAA show what proportion of the hour relate to flight training? I don't know what sort of statistics you keep and whether you're in a position to share them with some of the, and that did come from a member, it didn't come from me.
Yes, I think we've actually might have had that question from an FOI as well, actually. And most of that, I believe, we do hold. We're not going to be able to quote those figures exactly this evening.
Oh, no, I wasn't expecting it. It's really, do you hold that information? And I mean, it would certainly help, as I was saying, building on the comments about diversity in general aviation, understanding how we can make GA more attractive. If we can look at the data, and sometimes you can point to the crash of 2008. Well, obviously, some parts of GA fell off a cliff at that point. So how do we take the data we've got and try and look at how we can forecast moving forward and what the general trends are?
Exactly. I think that's a really good point and a point well made. And a lot of our policy work is built on the data that we have around some of the exact statistics you're quoting, and then also what the community would like us to work on. It's kind of those two things and the government strategy and CAA strategy that forms our programme of GA work. So all of those statistics, I'm pretty certain we hold. Two of the ones you've quoted, I know we hold because I look at them on a regular basis. Third one I need to check. But what we'll do is we will include those in the follow-up pack so that everybody can see those.
Thank you, Sophie. That'd be great. Well,
I think we are out of time now, Pauline.
Oh, good. Phew, because that's all I've got for you this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for helping us run the Q&A. We do appreciate it. And thank you to John and to Stephen for being part of the panel. This is the last of 3 events that we've run, but they are all recorded and they're available online. Please do give us your feedback. We put these on because we think they'll be helpful. And we deliberately, as I said at the beginning, put the topics on the agenda because we think they're the ones that you want to hear from us on. We thought you wanted an update on deliverables around the change programme. We thought you wanted to hear from us about SELMA, about licensing, both currently and the future, to hear from our chair about the new independent advisory panel and generally our approach to GA and engagement. So I hope that that's given you what you were looking for, but please do continue to give us feedback and tell us if these are useful. We've had quite a packed event this evening, so what we're going to close out with is a short animation which will give you some safety considerations for flying in winter as we get into that period. So thank you very much for joining us, and again, we hope you enjoyed the event.
Flying in winter. The days are getting shorter and it's getting colder out there. Late autumn and winter can be a fun and beautiful time to fly, but it can pose some challenges you'll need to be ready for. Before taking to the skies, do you feel confident about flying in what could be more adverse weather conditions? Do you have the skills and experience to deal with a sudden change in the weather or an unexpected event? There are some things you can do to prepare for the challenges of flying during autumn and winter. You could think about having a refresher flight with an instructor or chat through the challenges the different scenarios flying at this time of year can present. Ask for help or ask someone to look over your flight plans just to give them a sense check. Review the CAA's Safety Sense Leaflet number 3, dedicated to winter flying. There is a summary page inside offering handy tips. And make sure you have an active and working carbon monoxide detector on board. There'll be more details on that later. Here's a few more tips. Make sure you plan your route according to the conditions and think about how they might have an impact throughout your flight. An overnight frost might delay departures and reduce daylight hours for flying, for example. Plan navigation points that will be down sun to aid visibility and take into account the glare that occurs late in the day. Flying, landing or even taxiing in a westerly direction at sunset can mean no visibility at all. Take a few moments to review your aircraft's performance data, weight and balance, as ground conditions may be variable, affecting takeoff and landing distances. Daylight and airport operating hours are also much shorter in winter too, remember. You'll need a contingency plan in case bad weather has closed in at your destination or if headwinds are stronger than forecast. That may well mean having enough fuel reserves so you can land elsewhere, divert en route, or even turn back towards home if the weather is severe. Pre-flight checks are so important. Everyone knows to remove ice and frost, but beware of leaving wings, control surfaces and hinges wet. The clean aircraft concept is the only way to fly safely. There should be nothing on the outside of the aircraft that doesn't belong there. Don't forget to check the pitot static system for water, which can freeze and block the system. In the winter months, freezing altitude can come below normal flying altitude. And beware of carb icing following taxiing. Wet grass can throw water droplets into the engine intake. There may be a greater risk of water in aircraft fuel tanks in winter, so remember those fuel drain checks before takeoff. During the engine run-up, check that use of carburetor heat gives a satisfactory drop in RPM or manifold pressure. Consider how much the conditions change during the time before takeoff too. For instance, is the wind speed, including gusts, near your aircraft or personal crosswind limit? Double check that carbon monoxide detector too, and always live by that pilot saying, expect the weather to be 30% worse than predicted. Once you're airborne, practice a low-level circuit in case the cloud is lower than expected. Work out the freezing level and avoid flying through moisture above that altitude, no matter how light or inviting it may be. The smaller the droplets, the more likely they are to be supercooled and freeze rapidly to a cold aircraft. When near cloud, consider a burst of carb heat to avoid carb icing. Should ice form, get out of the conditions promptly by descending, whilst being aware of high ground, of course, climbing or diverting. If you encounter ice, tell ATC so that others can be warned. Carburetor ice forms stealthily, so monitor engine instruments for loss of RPM, fixed pitch propeller, or manifold pressure, constant speed propeller. They can be signs that carb ice is forming. Use the proper procedures at the right time can prevent problems from occurring in the first place. You should be ready to divert your route at any time and don't put yourself under pressure to get home should the weather close in. When it's cold, you're more likely to use your heater, many of which use air warmed by the exhaust manifold. If exhaust gases leak, it could result in carbon monoxide in the cockpit. Carbon monoxide is odourless and tasteless and can result in headaches, drowsiness or dizziness. In high concentrations, it can cause unconsciousness and death. Carbon monoxide detectors can warn of a leak, though only the advanced electronic sensors will actively engage a pilot's attention. We have them in our homes as standard practice, and it's an essential investment for the winter flyer. If you experience any of these symptoms or smell exhaust fumes, switch off the heating and open the air vents. So, flying in late autumn and winter can be a wonderful experience, but please make sure you are fully prepared, informed, and of course have that all-important carbon monoxide detector on board. Enjoy your flight.